Hello everybody, welcome to a new video series with me, Daniel Detwiler. We will mix a jazz pop song. Let me show you the rough mix and the mix. I will switch between the two versions.
Life begins full of questions, knowing nothing, then we learn more every day about the life begins full of questions, knowing nothing, then we learn more every day about the people, the world around us.
So, if you want to know how to come from a okay sounding rough mix to a really professional good sounding mix, then stay tuned. So we start with the drum. By the way, it's always a question of my students, how do you start a mix with which instrument? I mean, at the end, it doesn't really matter. I think in a tutorial, it's quite good if you listen everything once in solo. It's also something I recommend for younger mixer anyway. Also myself, if I get a mix, I usually check everything in solo mode once through, just to make sure to see if there is a mistake in the recording. I know there are mixers that are saying just open all the faders, see how it sounds, and then fix it if you hear something. I think in today's recording, where there are so many mistakes and so many cheap recordings, actually it's good to just check everything. So let's start with the bass drum. We did use, for sure, some equalization on the analog KDAC board. We boosted a little bit the basses with a low shelf, and we gave 2 steps of 3800 Hz and 2 steps of 5K. That's all we did analog to the bass drum. There is no compression this time, but this is just, I didn't feel it was necessary for that song because I wanted to keep a little bit of the punch. Then we have quite some digital processing as well. We have a little bit, let's first hear the bass drum with and without the analog equalizer, of course. So let me make a new loop again. Quite what you would expect from a nice sounding console EQ from a vintage console. A little bit more fat, a little bit more punch in the upper mids, and this is quite something that you could do in the box, but it's usually nicer with an analog equalizer. However, what I like with a plugin, there's a little bit decapitator. It's a plugin I really like. It's not much. Let's compare it. Just a little bit fatter. There is some digital EQ, and mostly I cut away some mids. I cut away resonating bass frequency, and actually to cut things away, I prefer those digital plugins hands down to any analog equalizer because there is so much more precision. And if we want to cut things away, we need precision. And there is a funny thing here. That thing is like a dynamic band in my EQ, so it gives some punch in the upper mids, but only in the attack phase of the bass drum. And dynamic EQs, that's also something where obviously plugins are way better. Let's hear with and without. and not that it was totally bad without, but in the mix this mid-frequency got into a fight with the double bass and with the piano. That's why we took it out, and this is something you'll hear it in the mix I show you later. Then there is some more saturation. I just got this Abbey Road saturator new, and I used it on this bass drum. It's a nice plugin. Let's hear it. And there is a little bit API compression. Probably the reason why I use the plug-in compressor and not an analog compressor is that I mean, if you mix in a hybrid way, like I do with an analog console, but also with Pro Tools, you need to find a way to make changes from a song-by-song basis. So I don't want to mix one song and then it's finished and then the next song comes. I want to mix an entire CD, a record, and then after a week of mixing, my client still wants to have changes. So all my analog settings that I have here with the compressors and the nice analog gear, it's usually I use this for the entire CD. And so if I have a plug-in compressor on a bass drum, if the drummer plays a ballad and I want to have more compression, I could just automate this plugin. While an outboard compressor you could not automate. Or if a really heavy tune is coming where the drummer really plays the bass drum heavy, then it might be way too much input level for the compressor, and then you are very happy if you can automate the threshold. And that's something great with those plugins. Then, I don't know how it was at home, but a lot of my students are always saying that they feel that every difference of every single plugin was rather subtle. And this is something, I like to say something about it because that's true. I usually do subtle things with every plugin because at the end, if you have 60 faders open, and all 60 fader you might have some thing going on, some plugins, some analog thing, and everything is subtle. But at the end, it's not subtle. It's like a good chef that is cooking a good meal. All the single spices and ingredients that he uses, it may be subtle differences between different cells. But if you have the fish and he would have cooked it with a good cell, a great cell, and once he would just take a cheap cell, you would actually smell the difference. At the end, it's very clear. Let me quickly show you how the bass drum sounds with all 4 plugins engaged and all 4 plugins bypassing. If you don't know this shortcut, just hit Control and then hit the first plugin, and then all following plugins will be bypassed. Let's hear that. And as you see, now the difference is much bigger. It's obviously also got louder with all those processing. I will see that maybe in the video edit I'll equal the levels a little bit so that it's more similar. And let's hear all plugins together in and in bypass. But at the same time, if the plugins are in bypass, I will also switch the EQ out. So at the end, with everything, the difference is like night and day. And in the mix, this is a bass drum that cuts through and that gives some punch. It's a jazz pop tune. We don't need maybe as much punch as in a pop tune, but we want that the bass drum gives some physical impact in the stomach. That's what we need.
Life begins full of questions, knowing nothing. Life begins full of questions, knowing nothing. Life begins full of...
Let's switch all plugins on the bass drum to bypass. Let's switch the K-Dag EQ to bypass. Let's hear it.
Life begins full of questions.
Make it a little bit louder.
Life begins full of questions, knowing nothing. Life begins full of questions, knowing nothing. Life begins full of questions.
And again, with the plugins and with that thing.
Life begins full of questions, knowing nothing. Life begins full of questions, knowing nothing. Life begins full of questions, knowing nothing.
Yeah, that sounds fine for me. At the end, it's always the question, what do we need in the mix? Finally, 2 speakers has nothing to do with the reality. The band and the stage won't come to the living room. Never, ever. It's not possible. As a mixer, I think the job is to do something nice so that it actually makes sense again to listen the music. And at the end, then it's a taste what you're doing, but it's not only a taste, because if the bass drum sounds muddy or if it's boxy and then it fights with the piano, well, that doesn't deliver a great emotion. That delivers a very sad emotion, and then nobody wants to listen to. So yeah, let's go on with the snare.